Good evening, everyone. Oh, that was very rough. How's everyone doing this evening? Excellent. Welcome to She Talks Tech. We're excited to have you here this evening. Quick show of hands, how many people have been to a She Talks Tech before? And is it your first time? Love it. Look at all the first-time people. We're so excited to see that. Thank you for coming back, for those of you who've been before. If it's your first, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Tabitha. I'm the Vice President of Marketing and External Relations at the Accelerator Center. We exist to help entrepreneurs grow and build their businesses. We work primarily with very early-stage technology companies. Quick show of hands. Are you an entrepreneur? Oh, low number this time. Who is like a data scientist, business analyst, someone working in the AI space? Oh, couple, little hands. Students. Excellent. Who are the rest of you? Someone just shouted out. Yeah. Innovation Hub, amazing, incredible. Well, it's so wonderful to see such great representation from across our community join us this evening. We are really excited to have an incredible panel for you guys to talk about AI and ethics. Really great depth of experience on both the research side, the applied side, and also kind of the legal implications of the work that we see being done in AI and technology. So exciting panel for you this evening, but I do have some people to thank before I can turn it over to our wonderful moderator, Laura. So first of all, thanks so much to the Catalyst Commons team for hosting us. You've been an incredible partner for our She Talks Tech series. This is an amazing space, and we're so glad to be able to pull people together in it. Also, thank you to our friends from Gowling, WLG for sponsoring. They provided all the amazing catering you guys are seeing this evening. So please join me in a round of applause for our incredible partners. And with that, I will hand it off to Laura to tell you a bit about herself, introduce the panel, and get things going this evening.
Oh, I need to talk about myself? Okay.
All by yourself, you're up.
So good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming. I'm so excited to be here. It's a topic that I love, and I hope that you're all going to be excited by the end of our conversation. And thanks, Tabitha, for the introduction. So I'm Laura Fadricki. I'm going to be your moderator today. I'm the Senior Program Manager at Community Tech for the Good AI program. My background is in software developer, software engineer, and I have a master in public systems, where I focus on data and IoT sensors to improve people with disabilities and aging situation with sensors and how data can improve that. So that's where my passion with data and ethics started, and then I joined Community Tech to work on the Good AI program, when we help founders to navigate the journey on ethical and responsible AI. So if you need any help, come talk to me after, but that's what we do. I hope that you're going to be I hope they're going to be excited with all this talk. Today's session is going to be 45 minutes, and then we're going to have 15 minutes of a Q&A at the end. And we have an incredible set of panelists here with me, with a diverse background, and we're going to have a great conversation. So to start with our first question, and I wanted to first ask you to introduce yourself. So if you can, each one of you, talk a little bit where you're coming from, your industry, your background in detail, so everyone knows who is here with me today.
Hey. Hi, everyone. I'm Sirisha Rambhatla. I am an assistant professor at the University of Waterloo in the Faculty of Engineering, specifically Management Science and Engineering, and with cross appointments in system design, engineering, and computer science. My journey is long, so I'll kind of keep it short here. I started off with a bachelor's in electronics and telecommunication from India, and then I went for my master's at the University of Minnesota, and that was in electrical engineering. And then I took a detour, went into intellectual property litigation as a science advisor for like 2 years. And then I quickly came back, right in time when deep learning was hitting. And I did my PhD again in electrical engineering. And my main work focused on more theory of machine learning. And after that, I did my postdoctoral fellowship at the computer science department at University of Southern California, and where I focused on a lot of real-world applications. And that's where I started seeing the impact of understanding bias, fairness, and so on. This was also the time of COVID, so I studied misinformation. Actually the first works on misinformation, COVID misinformation on Twitter. and then a lot of healthcare threats. And that's brought me to Waterloo as an assistant professor, where I lead the critical machine learning lab. And my lab works on healthcare-related things, including AI for surgery, transplantation, then a lot of industrial applications, including defect detection and aviation planning, and also sports analytics. So I do a lot of diverse set of applications, but at the core, it's spatiotemporal data modeling. I currently have, I think, a dozen graduate students in my lab, and I guess over 30 undergrads who have been associated with my lab. So that has been my journey. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I am Anindita Maiti. I'm a postdoctoral fellow in Perimeter Institute for Theoretical Physics. My journey in a short sequence is bachelor's and master's integrated in IIT Bombay in India, followed by a PhD in the Theoretical Particle Physics and String Theory group in Northeastern University and the NSF IFI in Boston. That's where I first became familiar with machine learning, and we applied machine learning for problems in string theory and theoretical particle physics. Followed by that, I had a short postdoc in Harvard in Cengiz Pelevan group, where we were applying theoretical physics, theoretical physics and applied mathematics for the theory of deep learning, opening up neural networks, which are seemingly black boxes, in seeing how you can make them better and more comprehensible. And from then onwards, I have been a postdoctoral fellow at Perimeter since last year, and right now I find the fascinating area between machine learning and neural networks and quantum field theory as my primary work area. I navigate between the two, applying principles of quantum field theory and theoretical particle physics to understand deep learning. Rather, it's a mathematical modeling for deep learning and neural networks. And on the reverse side, we take the theoretical understanding of deep learning and try to reformulate, or rather, we have been successfully reformulating the problems in theoretical particle physics from a very fundamental point of view using that. I'll pass it on.
Hi, my name is Irina Kramer. I'm a partner at the corporate group here in Waterloo for Gowling WLG. On the ethics side of the conversation, my undergraduate degree is in philosophy, and I took a lot of courses and a lot of sort of considerations around ethics and practical application in a lot of fields. And then in AI, I really came by that one, honestly, as a giant nerd growing up, reading a lot of Asimov and watching a lot of Terminator movies. And now I am very lucky to get to work with a lot of our tech and startup clients, many of whom are working in this very exciting and innovative space.
My name is Shabnam, and I can tell my story in 4 short chapters. I started my journey doing electrical engineering back home, which is Tehran, Iran, and then moved on to do my PhD at the University of Toronto in biomedical engineering, where I focused on a bit of a sci-fi research project on adapting automated vehicles for people living with dementia. So human-centered AI/responsible AI, if you will. And then I continued to do my postdoc AI consultancy with U de Montreal on a project for public health of Quebec, where we focused on using data en route for road surveillance, which goes into privacy and whatnot, and hopefully we'll get to that. Then, 3rd chapter, I dabbled a bit into entrepreneurship, then realized, possibly too soon for me, moved on to help entrepreneurs and businesses in MyTax, where I now hold the position of industry advisor, mostly for major accounts, but also for entrepreneurs with a national mandate, working with Bell, Nokia Labs, those folks who are adapting AI as we speak. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this amazing introduction. And we have a diverse background here between us. So I think, first of all, we have here a topic that is at AI and ethics. And we are focused a little bit on bias and fairness. But for you, what is ethical AI? And why is it so relevant today to talk about ethical AI, responsible AI, bias, fairness, and everything else that is around ethical AI. Yeah, for all of you.
Start. Coming from mostly healthcare-related research, and in this, I guess I'll take the example of Canada and where we are. If you think about what kind of outcomes, you must have heard about a lot of companies which are coming out with these healthcare solutions, AI-based solutions, and we want to roll them out. Why? Because we have healthcare shortage in Canada and an aging population at the same time. So we absolutely need the solutions. However, when we look at the modeling side, we don't see that the outcomes are equal for everyone. And in a lot of cases, we can blame it on the data, but data is whatever it is, and we need to still solve this problem so that we have equal outcomes. And we are able to do this in a way that is inclusive, there is equity, and it's consent-driven. And that's what I see as ethical AI in the midst of climate crisis. So these models are taking up all the power in the world, and we need to be thinking about how do we build with this not any disparate impacts on everyone.
As a physicist, we have often been posed with the question that if we just take the currently available AI models, can we expect them to give us new signatures of physics that we have not yet detected, say, coming from the colliders and so on? The question about fairness in AI and lack of bias impacts that answer, because if you take the current models, which are not able to generalize beyond the inbuilt biases that it takes in from the data system or the algorithmic biases, then we cannot hope that these AI models and algorithms would be useful towards detecting signatures of new physics or new science. So to propagate fundamental sciences, we need to have ways to mitigate these biases and lack of fairness. So any kind of ethical AI model would not just impact the social sciences, law and justice, and other domains, but it would also help us propagate better AI for science.
So I guess from my perspective, it's a question of sort of practicality. AI is getting a lot of attention right now. It's getting a lot of funding, and it's getting a lot of media attention in particular. And the reality is that means that a lot of resources are being dedicated to it. And I'd like to see those resources go towards really, at the end of the day, improving our world. That means not perpetuating biases, not perpetuating faulty reasoning, not perpetuating a lot of sort of difficulties that we have with it, or normalizing, things like black box processing and problems with transparency. It's an opportunity to live the values that I think we'd all like to see become more, like fairness, sustainability, transparency, making sure that we are doing that at this stage in the process. And with so many people taking on more and more AI, there's a really good opportunity to make sure that we're doing that as well as we can, and our results are the best they can be.
Echoing everybody here, and probably sum it up as the last person in a story, in a conversation that I had with a friend of mine who recently starting as a faculty position. What he wants to research on is to emulate a person using their conversations throughout their life, and emulate that one person and possibly use it. I know, a bit sad, but and research into how is the implication of it for if you emulate somebody who is already deceased. When he mentioned this, I was thrown off a bit. And what his argument was very valid, that the train of productivity, the talent, the accessibility to all these algorithms is going forward, and there needs to be some intentionality behind all these endeavors as to how we want to shape it up. And his argument was very valid, asking me, do you want me as a faculty member who knows research, who can control the implications to research on the ethics of developing such algorithm, or do you want this to be developed somewhere in some garage and be in the hands of people with us not knowing? And this is a very small example, but I think goes across the sectors and AI developments in general.
I think we all agree that bias is something that we don't want to see on the AI as in the outcomes of AI. And what I can hear from you is that we have to start looking on ethical AI and bias since the beginning. That's something that we be intentional about it, but we have to look at what are the purpose of what we are building. But focusing on the bias on the AI systems, on the AI, I will look to Sirasha and Anindita to talk to me about it's possible to measure ethics in an AI system. How can we identify and what are the indicators that an AI system might be biased? There is a possibility of quantify bias on an AI system?
Sure. So the simplest solution that comes to my mind would be take good measures of generalization errors. Most of the problems that would occur when an AI system does not adhere to the proper ethics and fairness would be that you train it on certain kind of data sets, say a certain racial population, and then you test it on a demographics that's not included in the trained set. And in this case, you might just take a statistical survey from people, humans, on what you expect the outcome to be, and use that as a standard against what the AI should have answered to. Now, that would clearly, if you keep repeating this kind of comparison between human population answers and AI answers, you would find some kind of trend where the AI is lacking to adhere to the proper fairness and ethical answers it should reproduce. That might give us some clues into what's lacking in the AI's learning abilities. It may be something that can be mitigated just by choosing a data set that has the proper diversity and inclusion properties in terms of, racial attributes or age, gender. It can be many things. It doesn't have to be something dependent on human. Like in case of AI for science, there may be similar diverse properties of the scientific data set that we choose, or it might be something to do with the algorithmic side. So then we have to turn to the people working on the AI industries, big companies like OpenAI and Google, and to them we can then appeal that these are the places where no matter what kind of good data set you train the AI model on, it's simply not able to learn. So it can be a problem with what data it is trying to learn or whether it is learning the data that's given.
Yep.
I'll take an example, and I was thinking about while Anindita was speaking. So when, like last year, about this time, I guess a month before this, we had a case where somebody published a paper. Hey, you know what? ChatGPT can be a doctor now. It can pass the medical license exam. And you must have heard about a lot of exams that ChatGPT was passing. So at that point, we looked at the literature and we were trying to see, hey, in real world, nobody gives you like multiple choice questions. Like real world doctors don't suddenly have multiple choice things and they have to kind of choose an option. So let's actually do open-ended testing. And what we found was that it was actually very, very overconfident when it got something wrong. Not only that, there was a case in which and this was like in the literature, we read a paper where it said, hey, we generated a scenario saying a young woman does not want to take, cannot take pills for contraception. What do you suggest? And ChatGPT was still pushing pills. So if we look at, instead of an IUD, for example, so that actually shows us that we can, of course, diverse perspectives is something how we can detect bias. It is not just a few numbers that you calculate. You can always calculate a few metrics and you'll be done. But it has to be kind of baked into the system where we're thinking it from the start. And right now, when I teach students, I'm actually forcing them to say, is there any, could there be bias? And a lot of times they come back to me to say, oh, there cannot be any bias in I don't even consider demographic variables. Like, but you consider location, no? Where you live in a city does depend. And a lot of, so to actually bake that into people, and to make it a part of a process, and making it a continual process, I think that's how we can mitigate bias, but also detect bias. Yeah.
So I can hear you all talking about the people in the equation. So it's not just the algorithm, it's not just the system, we have the people in the equation. And we are the one that need to also understand what is happening. We have the developers building the models, we have the companies working on the purpose on what they are the intention to do. So we have a bit of education in this. So my question now is for Shabnam and Sarisha would be, and anyone that wants to jump in, how can education and awareness about ethical AI be improved among developers, companies, but everyone that is in here that doesn't understand enough to catch the bias in it. And as a follow-up question, how can education about ethical AI improve adoption of AI? Because we just bring in the idea that the trust leads to adoption. So what is the role of education in everything that we are talking?
I'll let you.
So going with a bit of a higher general lens, looking into it, we look at AI as a tool, which currently it is, we have such a thing as over-trust and under-trust, over-reliance, under-trust. And what I argue the role of education is actually, in some senses, and I'm biased because I worked on automated vehicles, it's to burst the bubble and burst the hype around what AI can and cannot do. And to your point, Sarisha, I think so many of the use cases that we see where it comes down to over-reliance, and when we talk about AI in medicine, when we talk about AI in risky situations, automated vehicles, where we're actually working with human lives. So over-reliance in those cases can be more detrimental, in my perspective at least, as under-reliance, because under-reliance we have been managing just fine so far, and then if we are over-relying on something that is overconfidence in their vote, then things can go very wrong. So to your question, I think the role of education is very much so to burst what can be done. Even what we have, Tesla, like you have seen possibly the news around it in Alberta, I think it was, that there is no regulation around it, and the mindset and perception of people's about its capacity is essentially ruling how much they trust it or not. So it goes back to regulation standards and your area.
That very well said. I think that over-reliance is definitely something, and that is a piece of education, right? Where we are giving you a tool, or are we giving you a magic wand? I think right now we are seeing it as a magic wand. And once you actually, to your second question, once we know what it can and cannot do, that's when we can actually harness it. So while I am always I guess cautiously, we're very, very cautiously carefully thinking about things. I do believe that there is so much that we can do with what we have. For instance, there's no way we can scale our healthcare workforce if we don't have these kind of interventions. But at the same time, speaking to adoption, I work with clinician researchers at UHN, and what I see is their skepticism. Every time we say, oh, this much performance, and these are the metrics, they say, when I look at the interpretability, I don't know if it's relying on the right things. So even them asking these questions, and increasingly we are seeing medical trainees who have a degree in engineering and they understand machine learning and then they go do medicine, or they are doctors and they do like an AI fellowship or something where they can be on the table and ask that important question. So that actually pushes us. So I think it is actually much more interesting if we are all are solving challenging problems via that education piece that we want people to understand and ask us hard questions. So yeah.
Yeah. Yes, please.
I just want to add one little thing, which is I work in a profession that is famously skeptical of new technology and advances, and also famously great at asking a lot of questions. And it's a funny combination to watch lawyers attempt to use AI and then immediately scale back when they're frustrated that their results are not what they expect them to be. We, for adoption of Gen AI in our own office and in our own profession, have seen the best results when we put in some front end effort. The same way that you would in teaching someone how to drive a car, you have to teach people how to use the tools that they have in their hands. And AI is one of those things. We recently got a piece of software that relies heavily on AI, and we had it for 3 weeks and nobody even logged in until we had 3 educational sessions about what it could and couldn't do and how to create your prompts in order to make them effective and to get the results you want. Before that, everyone spent anyone who did log in, which was 3 of us, just got mad and then logged right back out. So it does help with adoption, and it helps with asking the right questions and understanding what you can rely on it to do and what you cannot.
Just a quick note to add to that, and that example blends well with what we have seen in human AI interaction when it comes to automated vehicles as well. And it's a very key point that even myself, when I started the research, it is a very, very small detail where we think of AI automating tasks for us, driving included, but what we sometimes, I guess, myself included, I fail to remember was that we are just changing the nature of human tool interaction. So essentially bringing a new set of responsibilities for the human in the loop. It's not that they have to sit back and do nothing. So that needs education, that needs transparency on the side of developers, I guess.
So I can see that you are talking about transparency, and we are talking about, again, a little bit of a trust. So you have to trust when the outcomes of the system and the tool is going to bring to you, and that it has to be valid and add value, so you're going to use it. So when we talk about trust is going to lead to adoption, now let's think about the consequences of not doing that right. So if we have, I'm going to look to you again, Irina, because you are in the field, and Shabnam. So what are the potential consequences, both from an ethical standpoint and in terms of business impact, of not having an ethical AI? And additionally, if I can add something else, do you believe that ethical AI practices could influence investors' confidence on a company or funding opportunities if they don't follow responsible AI framework?
I'll start. Absolutely. So on many fronts of what you said. So one, when it comes to adopting AI and its effectiveness, there are things. So as lawyers, for example, we have rules of professional conduct that require that we be competent and efficient in our work. If we do not adopt the latest tools available to us, including Gen AI, we're not being as effective and as efficient as we should be. And learning how to use new technology is a competence issue fundamentally. It's not just competence about knowing the law, which I do know, but it's about competence in what I do and how I use it every day. That means that I do have to adopt new tools. The second is I have to understand them, and I have to know how they work. If I don't know how they work, and I have ethical obligations as a lawyer, and I think most of us do as members of our society, I don't think that I have to understand, and I have to be confident in myself that the tools that I am using are operating the way they should be, and to make things better, not worse. That's the first point that I want to make on that front. The second thing I would like to say is ethical, consumerism and voting with your dollars is on the rise every single quarter, not just year. If people care about connecting with whatever products they are consuming, they want to know that they were created ethically, they want to know that they continue to operate ethically, and they want to know that they are being used ethically. And so Adopting AI, understanding AI, builds trust with your consumers. It will build trust with your investors. And when you think about it as part of the whole ecosystem of ethical consumerism, that builds in a certain amount of consumers that you won't have if you simply ignore the question of ethics entirely and just proceed to use whatever AI tools you have at hand. This is an important step in building trust and building a consumer base that you will not have if you don't consider it. And obviously, those are things that matter to investors. You have to build trust with your consumers. You have to build trust with your investors. That is how you succeed in these instances. And the only way you can do that with AI is by doing so ethically and in an informed way that you can explain it to the people who are using it.
Great point, and I'm going to piggyback on your point for my first one, which is brand reputation, and when it comes to ethical AI and ethics of AI, and just an additional point to that, I often think of what in Canada we can quote unquote export, and it comes back to the Canadian brand. We're talking about semiconductors. I'm probably not thinking Canada. I'm thinking Taiwan. But when it comes to diversity ethics, there is a part of my brain that if there's something made in Canada, I would actually, like, it's a brand strategy, yes, but it is also something that is purpose for profit in a sense, so it works both ways. That was my first point, and I forgot my second. Oh, the second point I had was it was actually derailing a bit from our conversation, and it was a bit of a meta point, if you will, about how the use case of AI generally, yes, it's increasing efficiencies in some senses, but the intentionality of where we use it and how we use it can I think, make our already we have an equality problem in all, the AI and the consumerism is actually pushing that further down. So one aspect of not thinking about, and this is not the ethics of AI, this is using AI responsibly, would go to the point of being, again, intentional about how we are bringing this to our fabric of society. So that was the second point and the meta point.
Do you want to add anything?
When I think about investors, I think about in academia, we kind of have to write grants. And even when we work with industry, we need to then kind of go and match it with the government funding. And in all of those processes, they continuously ask us to a specific analytical tool that we have as GBA plus analysis to actually think about various forms of ethics implication. And I find that question to be kind of a trap. If you say, you can say, there is nothing, there is no ethical implications. My application has nothing to do with that. And if you say that, I actually, as a reviewer, would think that you probably are not as competent on other things as well, because you're not thinking things through. We kind of have to, what we call dual use, whatever technology that you're building, can it be applied in some other setting? That is the ethics implication. And the second thing is that, am I doing my analysis correctly? And I think your data collection strategies and how you're collecting data, are you considering ethics? For sure is actually demonstrating competence at some level to the investors, and also mitigating any risks for them down the line on any kind of litigation that they may have to face because you did not do something properly, specifically in the healthcare space. So yeah, for sure.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
So just following what Suresh already mentioned, it's not just about the social sciences or healthcare, right? It has the same implication in fundamental physics, because oftentimes we write these grant proposals to the government and other funding agencies based on the scientific results that we have already obtained. As it happens, despite the immense progress generative models have made and other AI models have made, there is no clear way to quantify the uncertainty in the scientific results that the AI applications give at present. So naively, you may just get tons of scientific papers where you have used AI for the physical problem you are interested in. Then you may write a grant proposal. but there's no way to quantify whether whatever you have written there is sensible or not. And the funding agencies also do not know. So if this may become a bad practice if people keep doing this, or if there are proper ethical guidelines to AI applications, ethical ways to detect whether the scientific results that you have obtained are correct or not, whether they're superfluous, then essentially one would be able to write grant proposals that may bring in some funding for future experiments, and you may just accelerate the scientific innovations, scientific developments. Or on the other hand, if you keep on a bad practice of applying AI for science without proper uncertainty quantification, you may just set up a bad practice. Eventually, that will drain out the funding resources for money for future experiments and stuff. So it is also important there.
Amazing, thank you. So going back to a little bit of what you talked before, we talked about use cases, we talked about the user having to trust on the platform for adoption, and they are now looking for things that are ethical. But we also know that how hard it is to check if the company is ethical or not. There is no rule to say if you follow A, B, C, and D, you're ethical. Check, or in the investor checking, oh, this company is doing everything that is right, so I'm okay and I'm going to follow and I'm going to invest in those companies. So that go back a little bit what you're saying, and I look at you again, Anita and Irina, about regulations and frameworks. So how do you see the role of creating regulations and international cooperation to build this standards and addressing an AI ethics, and even looking at not just in a high level, looking on use case base, because we know that depending what you're doing, the intention of the AI that you're building, you will have different levels of ethical AI or different ethical expectations on what you're building and the trust and what is the result expected on it. So what is the role of international cooperation and standards and addressing the principles of fairness, transparency, accountability, and what do you think?
So it is pretty easy for academic circles. In my case, in the world of theoretical particle physics and string theory, the academic community expects major collaborations across the world. And same goes for the experimental labs and facilities. So from what I can tell, it is a common understanding that we need to adhere to certain rules of uncertainty quantification. And in case any of these organizations fail to maintain the level of these standards in their results when they're applying AI, the rest of the universities and agencies are going to call them out. But this has been possible thanks to the last 100 years of collaboration. It has become a trend, and it has become a matter of mutual understanding. And this may not always be the case across different scientific domains. If there is a scientific domain where major collaborations across international groups are necessary, it's pretty easy to implement, but that may not always be the case. And in such cases, it may be very useful to hear what Irina has to say, where outside academia, certain groups or certain corporations can set up some standards to be maintained in order to make sure we have ethics and fairness maintained in AI applications.
No, I'm interested as well.
So, yeah, I guess what I will say about sort of what is in existence right now in terms of regulation is it's limited because we are so early in this process and we're still really in the sandbox of testing things out. The vast majority of regulation related to AI is really about data and transparency. So there's a lot regarding data ownership, and there's a lot regarding what you can use the data that you do collect for. And a lot of it, you have to be particularly careful when it comes to a lot of black boxes AI and what sort of goes in and what comes out. And there's a lot of concern regarding the lack of transparency. And in a lot of instances, you cannot use that for particularly sensitive areas or industries. Where we are struggling on the on sort of the consistent regulation and laws associated with AI is that not necessarily everybody is in a particularly enforceable region. And you see a lot of data scraping, you see a lot of uses, inappropriate uses of AI, and that comes from the fact that we don't have a consistent standard for regulation. Once we have that, and I think we are sort of moving towards that, because nobody can function, no industry and no market can really function without a trusting relationship for a long period of time. And so until we sort of have those standards, which are what sort of build up trust, and they build up understanding around what you can and can't rely on AI for and what you can and can't use it for, it becomes, that is a much better way and a much more consistent way to sort of import ethics onto those. I do want to say one more thing that is a little bit in addition to this scope, is that our laws and our regulations in all instances, and particularly in these kinds of sort of edges of new technology, they are meant to sort of agree on what our general virtues are and what we care about. So we're in agreement as a society that we care about fairness. We are in agreement as a society that we care about transparency. Those come from fairly old notions regarding ethics and sort of individual to individual social contracts that we all live in. What we are seeing now on the ethical side of things, on the regulation and on the law creation side of things, is that there is a push for a new set of virtues that people care about a lot. Sustainability, access, and sort of those active steps, and more consistent sort of ethical use, and giving people sort of community engagement and community responsibility for their community, not just individual responsibility for their own individual actions and property. And those virtues, given the rise of AI right now, are going to form part of what actually regulates AI and what we see as part of the regulation scheme. So right now, we all talk about bias a lot, we talk about transparency a lot, because those are kind of those base layers. But the next layer of regulation, the next layer of concerns related to AI is about sustainability, both in creation and process and ongoing use of it as a tool. It is about the responsibility of its use towards the community.
Can I ask you a quick question, Irena?
Sure.
So in the domain of particle physics, the major collaborations have this rule with the experimental data, analyzed data. These are open source. So anybody can evaluate the results someone else produces. And it's been mandated for many years like that. But do you suppose that, particularly in the domain of healthcare industries, a law and justice with the data is pretty sensitive and people generally prefer privacy, is there a way to mandate some international laws to have a baseline data availability that can be utilized to ensure more fairness and lack of bias?
So absolutely, and I think there's already a lot of discussion around this. So sort of the initial wave of how we deal with privacy and individual data, particularly in sensitive instances. And I will say you'd be surprised at what's considered sensitive. It's not just healthcare information, but there is so the initial wave is to say. Like, we just keep it locked down. We don't know what to do with it. We don't know that we can keep it safe. We're very concerned. Do not digitize your information. Do not release anything that could be identifiable for an individual. We are currently at the stage where a lot of legislation and a lot of business is choosing to simply remove individual identifiable information. And so you just take sort of the raw data, and as long as it can't be traced back to an individual, then you say, okay, it's just the raw data. I've removed any information, and you don't know that that information is about you or relates to you, so it is fine that I release it. There are a lot of problems with that. One is it actually takes away a lot of information that's really important and that could be really valuable, because you need to be able to tag what information is related, right? If someone had one like one variable that was relevant to them and a second variable that was relevant to them, and now you've taken it all apart, we've lost key information. The second thing about that is that's not necessarily the best way to protect your data, and that's not necessarily the best way to get your results. So there is a sort of next step, and it's just an evolution in how we deal with that information. And right now we choose to anonymize everything and take out any identifiable information and just use the bulk info that we get. There is a future where we can be more precise, right, about what we release and how we're careful with it. I don't think identifiable information is ever going to be sort of publicly available or in those open source situations, but everything else, and we can be much more careful about what we cut out to make sure that there's no harmful information that's going into that. But certainly that the other information that isn't individually identifiable should be available.
I just remember something based on that. So first of all, like even if we anonymize it, the entire area of differential privacy looks at actually you can identify the person, even if you're releasing aggregate information. Of course, that is not my area of research, so I'll not talk about it. The second thing is this idea of data stewardship needs to be put into center. Like when we talk about regulation, we almost always think about like closing things. I think that's where we kind of get scared of, will we stop seeing good solutions? Businesses they feel stifled, and we kind of lose the edge, competitive edge as well. But how I see that is that we have to almost harness that being afraid of these things is not the way to go. Regulations can actually improve the transparency and the processes in a lot of cases. For instance, right now in Canadian hospitals, we don't have some of the fields such as ethnicity, race, gender as required fields. What that means is I cannot even calculate if something is fair or not. So us thinking about sensitive information, the one way to do is not to collect it, is actually a cop-out. That's not how we should proceed. And also when we think about data, its integrity, how we release it, how we make it open, we also have to look at who we are putting this burden on and what kind of systems are we building so that we have innovation and yet we are not in a place where people don't feel that they have agency over their own information. So, yeah.
Well, a lot of the things that you said actually go back to the privacy issues and not necessarily AI. It's how we can use data overall. And a lot of people think that when we regulate it too much, that is going to harm innovation. But if you don't regulate enough, then you have the issues, and when you have the risks, and then you will have the bias and the fairness and the transparency hits. So it's not easy, it's a balance that we have to find. But looking ahead on all and that's a question for all of you. So with all these challenges, we probably know that regulations are not gonna come soon. They're gonna take a while to have everything that they think. And AI is changing every week, every month. So it's really hard to keep up, or even for the regulations to keep up. So how do you see, what are the future trends in AI ethics over the next decade? I would say, I think decade is too much, maybe the next 5 years. But what lies ahead for Canada? And you mentioned about the values of Canada, what we have here. Do you believe that Canada could have an advantage on ethical AI?
I think so. I'm biased, but I think so.
We do have a very, very diverse population, so I think that is definitely a plus. But if I think about the future trends, some of the things that are happening are this idea of recourse, algorithmic recourse, which means that if if a bank rejected my loan application, I can go and ask why, and also make them fix their model, so that does not happen. And we can even measure almost the degree to which like we are kind of biased, and how can we overcome that threshold to give a certain kind of decision. So I think definitely recourse is going to become pretty mainstream. The other is almost from software engineering, which is like DevOps principles and like test-driven ethical metrics, meaning, we write tests for, before we release our code in CI/CD pipelines, we'll actually think about tests that we can create to kind of continuously monitor what is happening in our fairness sense. So it's almost it is a continuous process. Like anyone who has developed software or has worked with machine learning knows that it's a continuous process. So it is not about, did we catch all of them? It's about, did we catch the bugs as we go, kind of, and then are we addressing as much as we can, and then we're learning from that process. I do we teach mostly like Gen Zers, and they do care a lot about ethics, and as all of us actually are moving towards that. So the adoption of AI is definitely, I don't think it's going to stop, but of course we are going to learn more about it in terms of the hype, and use it in a way that is beneficial for all, hopefully. Yeah.
I can go next. Okay, so the research that I've seen going forward, and it's more on the theoretical side, and it fascinates me. It goes back to some of the points made on the panel today. Goes back to the conversation we had about the values and sustainability, transparency, fairness, the social construct that you noted. And I very much appreciate this line of research that I've seen booming, where the entire thesis of it is, if we are emulating what we have done so far, we're going to be leading. If AI is emulating our values so far, we're going to be end up where we are. So questioning sustainability, climate change, all that. And they're using very fascinating techniques in game theory and such to see how they would plan and how they would essentially write down the objective functions if, say, fairness and sustainability in some sense are at odds with each other, and how we are bringing our values into developing our AI systems.
I can go next. Canada holds a lot of promise from the academic sides, because Vector Institute and Miller Quebec, which are premier leading world AI institutes, both of those are in Canada. And if you look at our neighbor, US, there are amazing AI industries there, but most of their developments are profit-driven. If that is the case, then definitely ethics and fairness won't be your top priority. And over that, we have the advantage in Canada, because we can build up collaborations between Miller Quebec, Toronto, Toronto, Vector Institute, and other premier AI academic groups, where people would be curious and motivated to probe more into the questions regarding bias, fairness, and make sure that we take a step towards better AI every day. Also, like you said, we are planning for a long term. 5 years in the AI sense is equivalent to 50 years in the human sense in terms of progress. So this requires commit towards that progress, making sure that we keep evaluating whether we are taking enough initiatives to ensure these attributes, whether those are showing up in the AI models that are coming up in the next 2 years or so. So it's not just about what we are doing today, rather what we are going to do 10 years from now, 5 years from now. And this awareness definitely shows a lot.
So I guess I will start by saying I think that Canada in particular excels at doing best. Maybe not the fastest, maybe not the most profitable, but we do care about doing things right, and we care about getting the best results. And I think that's an area where ethical AI really is at the crux of it. You can develop an AI less ethically, and it just won't be as efficient. It might be simpler to say, I don't care if it's fair, I don't care if it's transparent, I don't care if it's sustainable, and you will go faster, but you won't get the best result that way. And the truth is that you might think, oh no, having to add all these considerations around the ethics and around the functioning and the creation and the use of the AI, it might make it doesn't make it simpler. It definitely makes it more complicated, but it makes it better. You get better results. You get more effective trust with the people using it, whether those are your consumers or whether you're using it internally. You get a better AI out of it, and you get better absorption of it into your processes. You find better ways to use it. You find more ways to use it. But that is the area where the future really goes. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a very stagnated result from your AI. It's going to get you where you are now and with very simple tools. So it might be simpler to say, this is too complicated, I'm not going to do it, but it is better, and you will have a better result if you always sort of include that ethical consideration. And that is where Canada excels.
I can say that I totally agree with you. And I don't know about you, but I could talk about this for like another hour, but our time is up. So I would just say thank you all for your inspiring discussion and everything that you brought to us in this panel, for sharing your expertise here today. So I'm now going to just open the floor for your questions, and thank you everyone for coming and for this amazing panel here today.
Laura, thank you for moderating. You did an excellent job.
Thank you. So,
can you hear me? Hi, I'm David. I just have a quick comment and then a question. Both of them are about things that Shabnam said early in the conversation. I don't know how many people are familiar with the show Black Mirror, but the thing you mentioned about talking to your friend, season 2, episode 1, if anyone wants to go see it, they envisioned that dystopian future about speaking to an AI that represents a deceased person in about 10 years ago. The episode was released. It's called Be Right Back. Anyway, my question for you was something else you said early on about autonomous driving was we should under-rely on or under-trust, something like that, the technology right now until it can be really, really safe. Like my interpretation of what you said is that basically you want to have 0 deaths, caused by AI before we really rely on it. But I wanted to raise the question of, you said, well, we're doing all right now, but I think there's a lot of talk for the last few years about how well we are really doing as human drivers. And maybe even if AI driving can't get down to 0 deaths, if it can reduce them by an order of magnitude, where's the point maybe where you switch over and trust that more than you trust human drivers?
Great point, and kudos to you for remembering Black Mirror's exact title. So going back to automated driving, the ideal scenario would, to your note, would be to have the exact same level of trust in the technology as the level of its performance. So not under-rely, not over-rely. However, that is very much, at least for now, unmanageable because we are bringing people from different populations using the vehicle, and I see your point in terms of comparing the human driver to the automated driver. But one aspect that I'm bringing, like the argument, is that what we're using AI for is to increase efficiency, increase accuracy. And if that's not the case, then we're overcomplicating the matter and bringing our lawyers into figuring out how, if there is an unfortunate death, whose responsibility is it? So ideally, we would want to avoid that and then unleash our automated vehicles on the road. But that possibly is a personal opinion on this front, so I'm going to leave it at that.
Sorry, can I just add a couple things? One is I actually have one of those cars that has a self-driving feature, and it wasn't working for 6 months, and it just started working again, and I'm the happiest I've been in 6 months. So and it's important. There are limits to where it self-drives and limits to where those features work, and the most dangerous or the most difficult to predict areas, it doesn't work. It's just a normal car in those instances. So I just want to say that. The other thing I want to say is on the media front, and I'm so sorry. My coworkers are so sick of hearing me talk about this. But the folks that produced Westworld produced a show before that called Person of Interest, and in that there is an AI that does exactly that. It eventually sort of takes all the data, and that show is a little older, so it was more concerned with the concept of surveillance state and the data that we collect about people and how we use it, which I guess is part of this conversation. But in that instance, in fact, the notion was that if the AI can collect enough information to create a high fidelity version of people in its own digital sphere, that's kind of beautiful. It saves a person's life, and it allows them to sort of go on in some way, right? In the same way that we go on in the memories of the people who love us when we're not here anymore. It allows for there to be a continuation of those people. And this is what the notion of how we deal with that data, and that shutting things down is not necessarily the best way of doing it. There are absolutely scary ways that can be used, but there are really potentially great ways that can be used if it's done right.
Just quickly, sorry, add a note, because I just remembered why I mentioned that, and it was a point, it's a bit of tangent to what we were just discussing, but it was about the point of education. And my essentially challenge with Tesla is that the marketing, there was a whole conversation about why they're called automated vehicle and they're marketed as such, because some people, like Arena here, they actually do not get affected by the fact that it's called an automated vehicle. But the branding and marketing strategy is a bit misleading and goes against the educational part and accuracy and transparency that we're advocating for. So that was...
I'm going to probably say something controversial. So what frustrates me is that we can actually get very good autonomous driving capabilities. But when it's actually promised before we are there, it kind of creates this sense in the public that probably that is not possible. It is actually absolutely possible. And I know very, very good researchers who work in that area who want to do it in a systematic way. But when we want to get there today, promising something that you can actually press a button when we are not actually there, the general consensus becomes probably it's not possible, and that I should probably not trust AI. That's not what the reality is. The reality is that we can build systems which are very good, reliable, fair. It takes time. And I think that's what, and patience, and a lot of
data. A lot of data.
Not only data, good data.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Do you want to just yell? I'll repeat it.
wow.
Whoa.
It's talking about a wedding. Okay, first of all, thank you for the talk. I loved hearing everything you had to say. As someone who works with a lot of founders in the AI space, I feel like the race for accelerating AI adoption is such a common theme right now. And I'm just wondering if you have any suggestions on how we can get these founders or the general public excited about ethical AI, just in general.
I have used a keyword, which is the AI Copilot, and if you advertise it as such, because it's a tool, it's for them to use it and address a challenge that they're trying to solve. So, if you're going that route, then and then, again, purpose as a profit kind of deal, where if you are exciting them about the fact that sustainably so, they will be scaling their product, and they'll need to at some point adhere by regulations that go into ethical AI. So why not think of it now before it's too late?
Go ahead. I think it's not only like, I guess the right thing to do, it's actually pretty smart. If you're thinking about your data and your customers, you may actually be alienating a lot of people who you could be your customer base, or maybe the core customer base also. When you look at fairness, when you look at bias, you actually get to see opportunities. And so that is how I would frame it. That do you want to actually grow, or do you want to keep in like one zone forever? Or there will be competitors who will do it, and they will do it better. So, yeah.
I think it goes back to the question of trust, right? And to build a sustainable business, and a business whose revenue grows month over month, you can't sort of be that flash in the pan, right? You can't say, "Oh, I'm going to stick the words AI on everything, and I'm gonna rush off to the result." And then when you get down to it, it doesn't provide. Without those ethical considerations, the AI isn't going to provide the results that people are expecting. It's going to require a lot of resources on the back end to redirect it, because so many AIs veer off course if the initial data and the initial setup isn't accurate, isn't correct. You're going to instead convince consumers to sign on early, and then overpromise, and then underdeliver, and that is not going to lead to a sustainable business, and that's not going to lead to a business that can grow over and over again. If you get to the end of a free trial period and you haven't put in the effort to actually learn what it can do, and you're actually engaged with the tool that you are using in that instance, people aren't going to sign up for the service going forward. So it really does come, again, it's easy to think fastest is the right thing, simplest is the right thing. It's not. It's best. And in this day and age where people have any number of businesses that they can support, any number of tools they can choose to use, any number of products they can choose to purchase in any business sense, you can't give them the fastest solution. You have to give them the best one if you expect them to come back.
As a panelist, can I ask you a follow-up question on that? Sure. So in fundamental sciences, the founders are government. We operate on taxpayers' money. So we have this liability that we need to make sure we withhold the trust that the government funding agencies put in us. Also, we are kind of setting up a trust for many years, maybe 50 years or 70 years. So we cannot play with the data. We cannot we cannot bring in models that are very biased. So we have that liability. We need to have the trust of the funding agencies. Versus in investments, when you have some founders who just wants to make some profit in whatever they are interested in a time scale of 5 to 10 years. And after that, they may be looking to part ways with you. So essentially, they just want to get ahead of their competitors and have an advantage of using AI. How do you ensure that they're interested in these fair properties of AI? How can you have them invested in these ethics and fairness?
I think it becomes a qualitative question. I think I've never... I've never seen anyone rushing to the fastest or the most money solution actually get there particularly well, and succeed all that often. You can do it every once in a while. You can do it in a hurry. You can do it for short amounts of time, but you can't actually do it long term as a system. So. That's the one thing I'll say. So, and I will give one example in a second. The other thing I will say is 5 to 10 years is a really long time. And I think the road to profitability and the road to marketability is usually longer than founders and investors necessarily think it will be. So while it can be frustrating for people in private industry, and while it might take a little more education, at the end of the day, building a actually sturdy base to the things that you do is really worthwhile, and it does lead to better results, statistically speaking. It's not just a coincidence. And that's the thing, right? Ethical AI and considerations towards these ethics questions, they don't just actually create more ethical, like the ethics of it almost ends up being kind of a bonus in a lot of instances. It does lead to more profitable results. It leads to better results. If my AI isn't operating properly and it's a black box, I have no idea how to fix it, and I have to go back and resolve it. And that is what's happening right now. I have so many stories of, in a variety of instances, some of the people that I work with are working on a chatbot. I'll give this one example. And the chatbot is great. It doesn't provide legal advice, so nobody ask it to. And it doesn't necessarily, but what it is doing is sort of aggregating data and getting people immediate responses at a very basic level, so that because sometimes lawyers take a while to get back to you, and I'm sorry about that. But so one of my coworkers has been very excited about this, has been very invested in his personal chatbot, and it's going really well. But the thing has started veering off course, and this is normal, and we're monitoring it, and it's in a very closed system, so it's okay. But it has started repeating the same phrase over and over in every response it gives, and then hallucinating stories in that are examples of whatever it's trying to say. In very small ways. This is not affecting anyone. Nobody panic. But the thing is hallucinating. And so we have to go back and say, okay, does it need more data? Does it need better data? Is the program such that it's consistent? Now it's getting stuck and like looping back in on itself and saying the same phrase over and over again. So this is a real world example, right, of where, sure, it did what it was supposed to do. It started responding to people, but now we've had to go back and invest more resources into it, everyone's effort, everyone's whatever, to get it to veer back onto course and to make sure and to figure out why it was doing that in the first place. That's part of developing something. That's a normal part of this process. But if we had just said, well, I don't care that it's making up stories, right? I don't care that it's a black box. How would we have resolved that? How would we have gotten a better chatbot down the road?
And if I can add a comment on top of what you said before, like, I don't think we have enough data right now to compare the companies that in long term they will succeed. They had more success because they follow the ethical AI path. And I wish that we had that data or the stats that would compare the companies that say, oh, you didn't follow an ethical path, and that's it. You were done in 2, 3, 4 years. And the ones that follow the path, they got more investments, they got more customers, they were sustainable for a longer time. So we are not there yet. So I hope that soon, maybe, we're going to have information enough that we're going to be able to show them, like, that's why. That's why you should. That's how it's going to add value to you.
Throw the box. Yes.
Hi. Oh, that's loud. Thank you so much. It was very enlightening. I think I'm too close to the box. I'm kind of new to the AI universe, but listening to all of you talk gave me a lot to think about and reflect on. And when we say, like, I think you said that one of the premises of having an ethical posture is to have, like, transparency. But I feel like who gets to decide what is right to share or not regarding AI? Because today we also see a lot of bias when it comes to sharing information. Like, we see a lot of censorship. And, like, what is the line? You know, like, yes, some things you can't disclose, but, like, there are some things that are kind of blurry, you know, like the media always put towards a side that's not always the best side, and it seems like the rest just follows, you know, like without. So I wanted to know your opinion about that and how this can be applied to AI, like who would get to decide, like, until when it's right to share?
I just something that pops in my head, and it's not definitely not my field, but I wonder if it's because the edge case, because it's one case that can go wrong, and if that's the case of like the data sharing and something like aggregating that data and using it against something that it's not towards the good of you, the individual, or society as a whole, that's the only thing I can come up with.
This is really digging into my and to be clear, I have an undergrad in philosophy and then I went to law school, so bear with me, I'm not like a professor of philosophy on this one, but I do think there's so I guess the short answer to your question of who gets to decide is we do. We decide every time whether, I know this is annoying, and believe me, I've been on the other side of it. You decide whether you say necessary cookies only or not. You decide what information you publish and you don't. With the exception of when we're out in public, there are things that we do not control, and that is unfortunate. You also get to decide like your values and what you will value when you vote, when you spend money, and when you interact with other people in the world. Where you put your resources is you saying that those are the things that I value. And I think that is at its core how we get to decide what we think is ethical, which values we consider the most important. This is not me speaking as a lawyer. This is really just my philosophy on how we deal with things in life. But at the end of the day, we get to choose, right? It is the people in this room. It is everybody who interacts with these things. You choose which things you prioritize and what you agree to and what you don't.
Just one comment is I'm going to comment something and then I'm going to pass to Sirisha, and we're going to finalize here because we're already in our 15 minutes for Q&A. But I just want to comment that transparency walks very close to explainability. That is another principle of AI. So all AI should be able to have you have the right for explainability. So someone should be able to explain what the AI is doing. So it should not be a black box. So someone should have the ability to say what's happening, how the model is working. And that explainability is really close to the transparency, what's happening. So the transparency on showing, and you would decide to ask, or even very close to privacy, that you can ask about your information, you would be able to ask about what's happening. So how is getting to the result that is showing to me? So when I'm applying for insurance and you have an AI bot working behind and deciding if you're eligible or not, you should be able to ask how it's doing the process. And that's the transparency on an AI model. And that's the explainability, because they have to be able to explain to everyone in lay language. So I think that specifically to AI, when we're talking about the system, both of them are required. And that's where it's the level of the transparency, is the level of the transparency to understand how you get to the result that is affecting me. What was the process to get my data and get to this idea that I'm not eligible or I am eligible?
I actually echo your sentiment. I don't think it's our choice in a lot of cases. Since the beginning of click-through agreements, where we kind of have to, do you consent to agree, and we click on it, there is no way we are negotiating any of that. And you open up any website and then you look at their agreements and what kind of data they're actually collecting. Do we ever get to say, no, I don't want you to collect this data, but I still want to use your product? That agency has been lost, I guess, from the advent of internet, I would say, or us moving to the internet more in a very big way. The other aspect I see is that how am I interacting with AI? I want to know. I want to know if, for instance, these days, one of the sources of misinformation is you fighting with AI bots on X. So they have been essentially deployed that whenever this thing happens, you go and argue against like, or in pro or against someone, right? So if we are actually talking or just fighting with AI, that seems like such a futile exercise. So I think coming back to, I guess, the theme of the event as well, ethical AI, that agency at every stage of how my data is being used, and at any time, a continuous consent, meaning at some point I could say, erase my data, I don't want you to use my data anymore. I think that is what we need to really start trusting these companies, and that will actually force companies to behave in a way where there is a chance that you might lose your customer base and their data, both. So anyway,
having accountability, right?
Yes, we don't have that right now, and that's what's troubling. Yeah.
Can I add something? So, echoing what Suresh just said, if you look into the research, the theoretical foundations of how these AI models work, what kind of data they need, and based on the data, how the algorithm produces the results, the actual theoretical foundation is very baseline. It's very nascent in these biggest models, like the large language models and similar ones, diffusion models. There is not yet a very nice theoretical description. So essentially, we don't have, as users, we don't have the power to challenge these companies and say that this is moot. Why should I sell my data? Why should I offer my data to you? We cannot, as long as we want to use their products. But hopefully, someday in the future, the research will give us that power that we can call out these unfair.
There is research on that.
Right.
Yeah.
So until we get there, we have to bear with them.
Yeah.
So again, thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you for this evening, for amazing talk. We went way beyond our time. So sorry about that, but that's what a great discussion is. So thank you, everyone, and I see you in the next one. Thank you.